Hello YouTube, I'm Andrew Does Hair. You can find my work on Instagram at Andrew Does Hair. Today we're going to do a haircut that is somewhat 1990s inspired, something you might see in an episode of Boy Meets World, or something you might see on John Connor in Terminator 2. So this is going to be loosely based on that kind of look. I'm not saying this is the exact way to do that haircut. This is just one way that I might go about doing it. So I'm going to start off with the middle part here. Once I have the hair parted in the middle, I'm going to start by taking the length and creating a guide that's going to go around the back of the haircut. Now at the beginning of this guide here, I'm going to pull everything straight down to cut it. The reason is I'm going to want the front of this haircut to be kind of blunt and heavy. So if I pull everything straight down, then these hairs all the way at the top are going to be long enough to come all the way to the bottom. Where if I took this and pulled it out here and cut it, it wouldn't be long enough at the end to meet all the rest of the hairs when everything falls down to the bottom. So at the beginning here, I'm just going to create a little bit of a shape that I want to leave as much length as I possibly might need to, because I can always take off more later, of course. But I want this haircut to be longer in the front and shorter in the back, right? So we're going to create this kind of arced shape here that mostly is going to echo the shape of the parietal ridge. So if you're unfamiliar, the parietal ridge is the widest part of the head, and it kind of comes up like this and then down right here. You can find it by rocking the comb against the head and seeing where it pivots off the head. So we're going to echo that shape, but kind of exaggerate it in the front here and come even further down just so we can have some extra length. So I'm going to pull the hair downward, probably going to cut this to, I don't know, the middle of the ear, but start to slant it upward to meet our design line that we want here to follow the parietal ridge. So roughly maybe something like this. Maybe I'll come up just over the ear. Now, even the width of my fingers elevated this enough that it kind of layered it there. And as I said a minute ago, the higher I lift this up, the softer the layers are going to kind of fall. So if I let it hang and cut it, there'll be 0 layers there because I don't even have the width of my finger holding that up. So now that I'm, about the back of the ear, I'm going to continue to bring this line along the parietal ridge. But as I'm building the guide here, I'm going to start to elevate the hair because I want it to be more layered and blended back here and more blunt and heavy in the front. So as I'm continuing to take this line and put in my guide, I'm going to start lifting sections just a little bit more. Now I'm not grabbing everything here. I'm kind of just grabbing the hair that's probably about going to be that weight line. And I'll lift it up slightly as I cut it. And now as I'm coming to the back of the head, I'm going to lift this even further because I want it to fall even softer. All this down here I'll worry about later. So for now I'm just taking the hair right around where that line is. So now as I comb this down, you can see a little bit of a bowl haircut shape, but it's a little bit softer in the back and a little bit bowlier in the front. Once I get to the middle of the back of the head, instead of continuing to work around here, I'm going to stop and go back to the opposite temple. So at this point, I'll take this opposite side that I had already cut and use it as a guide to cut, to know where to start cutting this side here. So I have my short pieces over here that I already cut, my long pieces over here that need to be cut. I'm just going to find the middle and connect them. So now I have this piece over here that gives me a guide for creating my shape on the opposite side. And as I work to connect here to here, I have a guide here, I now have a guide here, and I'm just kind of building that shape on this side as well. On this side of the haircut, it's really hard to work without blocking the camera, but if I pull this down, I can see my guide that I made. Same thing in the front here. I don't want a lot of elevation because I want to kind of put a hard line here. I'm going to cut everything to that guide. Maybe pull this out of the way, I'll come back to it. What I'm doing here to kind of get an easier angle with my scissors, I forget what they call this, Eastern grip or something, but if you take your thumb out of your scissors and put it on the opposite side, you can get different angles without contorting your body and weird ways to do so. And again, as I reach the back of the ear, I'm going to start to elevate this just a little bit while I put in my guide. Sorry, comb, get out of the way. I really hope I'm not blocking the camera when I do that. I apologize if so. So now working around the back here, I can connect this left side guide that I was just making to the right side guide that I stopped making halfway around the head. Boom. So you can see now that aside from these sort of jellyfish tentacles hanging out from underneath our initial shape here, if you ignored that, we almost have the haircut. So we're almost done, right? Now I could come in here and take vertical sections to knock this all down, but I think I'm just going to scissor over comb it. So at this point, I'm going to stop and flat wrap the hair. Now if you don't know how to flat wrap hair, I have a couple videos about it. I'll put links in the description below. So like magic, I'm going to cut away and come back to flat wrapped hair. So now that the hair's been flat wrapped, you can see so much more of that shape we put in there. If you're not flat wrapping your haircuts, you really should start. See, the thing is, if the hair's laying like flat like this, you can see every imperfection. So if you're going to go back and refine the haircut, flat wrap it first, and then you'll see everything that needs to be done. And clearly we have a lot to be done right here. So what I'm going to do with this back area is scissor over comb. Now, this is always hard to do without blocking the camera, so I hope this stupid hand doesn't get in the way. I'll try to be good. What I'm going to do to take down the bulk is actually cut from the top down. So if I were to pull up this hair so that the hair I'm about to cut is elevated parallel to the floor, if I pull that up, I can see just above it my guide there. So I'm just going to cut everything to about that guide. The same thing with this section next to it. When I pull it up, I can see the guide on top, and now I can just see the last section that I cut. So I'm going to use both those guides to kind of know where to cut this hair. And I'm going to do that all the way down. As I lift up this section, I can see the last section I cut just above the section I'm about to cut. And it tells me where to cut that next section. Now you'll notice I'm taking big chops and I'm being more or less a little bit sloppy with this. But after I get all the bulk taken down, I'm going to go back in and refine it. So again, if I lift up this new section, I can see my guide on top. I can see the last section I cut over there. And I can quickly and easily know exactly which hair needs to be cut. So now that I've got all the bulk knocked down, I can go back with a finer comb and refine everything and make it look clean. So what I'm doing here is I'm literally sculpting the haircut to where I want it to end up. Now as I was taking down all the bulk, I was taking a few big chops along the way down. As I go back to refine, I'm going to take many small chops. And I'm barely taking off any hair as I do this. But what I'm doing is I'm kind of driving my scissor along an invisible line that I know I want the haircut to be shaped like. So it's literally just sculpting. It's carving out a haircut. And up here where my guide got harder, my shape is going to be less soft and layered, and it's going to scoop out more to kind of blend into that hardness. Until eventually, I'm cutting at the front here with no elevation, just like we put in the guide. No elevation. Slight elevation, more graduation, or what do you call, I don't know, layers. More something. I'm just changing the shape of what I'm doing. Change the outcome. I don't know all the fancy terminology for everything. Probably killing my credibility by saying that, but whatever, I'll let the work speak for itself. Now, as I'm refining this, you'll see that I'm going to go over the same spots a couple of times because it's exactly that, refining. You're probably not going to take one pass and have like a perfect finish on it. You just kind of keep working until everything looks pretty to your liking. So if I didn't flat wrap the hair and I let it just kind of air dry and it had some waves in it naturally, I couldn't do this as precisely. All this fine tuning stuff, what I tell my clients when I'm like overly straightening their hair is the straighter I can get your hair while blow drying it, the more precisely I can cut it. If anything's waving a little bit, it's really hard to glance at the haircut and go, oh, that's crooked. But if everything's perfectly straight, you can see from a mile away if there's a piece of hair sticking out that shouldn't be wherever it is doing whatever it's doing. The other thing too is flat wrapping will settle down cowlicks and kind of get everything to lay really uniformly at the root. And as you would imagine, that makes it much, much easier to do a haircut. Like if you rid the hair of cowlicks and then cut it, same thing on this side. As I'm kind of connecting my soft area in the back to my hard area in the front, you're going to see me start to sort of change the shape of my cutting angle here. Here I'm going to sort of cross-check some of these areas where the hair's not quite laying as beautifully as I want it to. So instead of coming straight up like I was when I was cutting it, I'm going to kind of come in at a diagonal and look for any inconsistencies. Sometimes it's just the way the hair's laying, like if you didn't do a good enough job flat wrapping. Sometimes it's you missed a spot. Now, if you wanted to, you could come in here and give this haircut a taper, or you could give it a soft edge, or whatever you want to do to finish it. I'll kind of break it up here, and if this were a human head with like fuzz around the neck, I would go up and shave the hair underneath this little bit that's hanging. It just makes everything lay a little nicer and grow back a little more cleanly. So I'm just going to kind of point cut all this area along the edges. A lot of clients prefer the way their hair looks a week or two after they get it cut. And by breaking up these edges instead of getting out the edger and lining them up, this kind of makes your haircut feel 2 weeks old on day one. Now, some clients would hate that. Some clients would prefer if everything was crispy and sharp, but other clients hate crispy and sharp and they want everything to be soft and kind of more natural looking. Now, if your client wanted to look like they just walked out of the movie Brink, like an extra on the movie, this could be pretty much done. It's very, very heavy. It's very, very blunt. But the shape is there. The structure is there. If you were to just kind of comb this back and let it fall, like boom, straight 90s. But if your client's like, you know what, I think I need it a little bit more contemporary. I feel like that dude from the Three Stooges. That's what I'm seeing right now. If you want to make it move a little more, be a little softer, and not be so bulky and mushroomy, because that's the big complaint. It's like, oh, I feel like it's a mushroom cut. And I think actually some people refer to this as the mushroom cut. So I'm going to go through and actually texturize it and soften it up and modernize it a little bit. I'm going to start off in the back. And what I'm going to do is take some of this length on top and get it out of my way just so I have less hair to work with at once. Try to clip this in a way that I don't put too much of a bend in it. I don't want to twist it or anything. So now I'm going to take vertical sections and take weight out of this transition area. And the way I'm going to do this is by kind of deep point cutting with an angle pointing downward. So if I were to cut this that way, so that these little shark's teeth I'm putting in were pointed upward, then when the hair was pushed and moved, it would want to kick out there. But I want it to kind of bend down and hug the head. So I'm going to cut everything long to short with the short sides on the top and the long sides on the bottom. And by doing this, what happens is these shorter hairs are more rigid than the longer hairs that I left out on the silhouette. And so the shorter hairs, there's a saying, short hair pushes long hair. Those shorter hairs are going to want to push those long hairs downward. And as I'm doing this, it's also taking out a great deal of weight. And so when this is done and it lays down, it's going to look a lot less like a bowl haircut. Now, if you go too deep when you're doing this, then those short hairs will really stick out, and you can add a lot of volume in here this way. But I'm being mindful that the deepest hairs that I'm cutting here are still long enough that they'll want to easily kind of bend and lay down. I'm just sort of breaking up the ends, and the way I think of it is I'm putting air in the silhouette. I'm injecting air into the shape of the haircut so that it moves and it breathes and it doesn't just lay like a heavy wall of hair. You could, I guess, do this with like texturizing shears. I like to avoid texturizing shears whenever I can. There are some jobs that I need it for, like if I'm texturizing hair that's really, really short. But for the most part, I feel like I get a lot better control over the outcome of my haircut if I just texturize it with the regular shear, because again, that directional cutting is going to be huge as far as dictating the way that the hair is going to act. So now I'm going to take that hair that I had clipped up and I'm going to do the same thing to that hair. You can actually see here probably, down here it's been texturized. It's got that kind of soft, airy finish to it. And up here it's not been texturized. It's like blunt and heavy. So that's all we're doing is just kind of putting air in there and at the same time directing the hair on which way we want it to bend based on the way that we turn our scissors while we're cutting this. Anywhere I see a really blunt, heavy area right here, I'm just going to replace some hair with air. You can see down here it's been texturized. That's that last section we did. And up here it needs to be texturized. So when you texturize hair, don't like act like a robot and just go through and do the exact same thing to all hairs. You want to really personalize and customize the way you're texturizing it to make the hair act how you want. It's a very subtle thing, but thoughtfully doing this throughout the haircut can be the difference between like, oh, my hair was hard to style, and oh, my hair just like fell into place. It's these little things you do to the ends of the haircut while you're texturizing it that will really help it to just like, what's the word I'm looking for? Cooperate, really. You'll be able to see as I'm doing this, that kind of mushroom appearance is going to go away, and these corners are going to lay a lot sleeker. Now the shape is still there. I'm still leaving the shape out here. I'm just taking weight out of it so that it doesn't pile up as much where it does pile up. I'm twisting all funny to try to not block the camera with my hand. And I'm going to continue doing this all the way around the haircut. And hopefully you'll see on this side here, as I do it, because I didn't do this side yet, but as I do this side, hopefully you'll see that it just gets way, way sleeker. So I'm going to take some of this length and clip it out of my way so I have less hair to work with and less hair to hold. I'm actually going to sort of slide cut these hairs here. And I'm making sure I'm not cutting too close to the scalp. I'm kind of like putting the scissor in, bringing it down an inch, and then closing it. This will kind of break up that line as well. And same thing, what I was saying about the directional cutting having influence on the way the hair lays. I want this, for the most part, to lay back. So I'm cutting front to back, and it's absolutely going to have a little subtle, minor influence on how that lays. Maybe I'll then elevate some of this and point cut into it. The same thing, I'm going to angle my shear so that I'm cutting short to long in a back leaning direction here. As I'm holding these sections, I'm really anything when I'm texturizing it, I'm trying to keep a lot of space here. If everything's kind of like wadded up into a small little section like that, you can't texturize that. Like you need to kind of put air in there and then cut it, and then that air kind of remains as it moves throughout the rest of the life of the haircut. So you want everything really, really spread out here. Up here where the hair is considerably longer, I can cut a little bit deeper into it to break it up without the risk of cutting those tiny short hairs that'll only want to stick out. Down here where the hair is a little bit shorter, I'm going to do finer, littler chops. And then up here where the hair is longer, I can get away with like bigger, chunkier texture without putting holes in the haircut. If you try to put big, chunky texture in short hair, it just looks holey. Like it looks like there's gaps missing in the haircut. But with longer hair, you can get away with taking out big chunks. And then maybe once again, I'll do a little bit of slide cutting here. Here it's really plain to see. On this side that we texturized, the hair is going to lay flat and sleek to the head. It's going to move really nicely, right? On this side, we have a mushroom. So they have the same shape. The length is the same on both sides. But what's different is this side has, every single hair is the same length, and so it's all coming down to the same point and piling up down there and pushing the shape of the haircut outward. That's how you get that kind of mushroom shape. On this side, not every hair is reaching the line that we created, and so those hairs that aren't quite going all the way down there are allowing the ends of the hair to kind of lay flatter against the head. Massive difference. I always like to take the client halfway through texturizing and show them like, look, we didn't do this side yet. We did this side. That's why I sit and refine the haircut so much. And truth be told, I think like one of the biggest differences between an amazing haircut and like just a haircut is this refining at the end here and the texturizing, the fine tuning after the blow dry. Now I'm just going to work through the right side to do the same texturizing we did on the left side. All right, that's what I would call a done haircut. I'm gonna go in and blow dry it a little bit to give it some life again. I made everything really, really flat just to refine the haircut, but now I'm gonna kind of pump it up a little bit and get some movement back in there. Now to finish this look, you could go heavy and hard with like gel and hairspray if you need to go into the office, kind of like slick everything back. That works too. But I'm going to use a lightweight matte water-based product here. So this doesn't get stiff, it doesn't get hard. It's a little bit sticky, but that's kind of what you want from a product for texture. There's no shine to this. It pretty much just makes the hairs stick to each other so that you don't have fluffy hair. It kind of gives you that second day look on day one. And what I'm doing with it is applying it to the roots of the hair. You'll see I'm kind of reaching through the hair and massaging it onto the scalp. So I like to do that and get it more on the root and less on the ends to begin with, because the ends are going to be heavy regardless, just because the hair is long and it's got heavy ends. So I don't want to weigh the ends down anymore with product than I need to. So I'll just kind of like lay it over the short hairs, work it into the root of the long hairs, kind of push the hair in different directions while I put it in here. And then what that little bit of sticky is going to allow the hair to do is have somewhat of a memory. Like, it doesn't have hold, it doesn't get hard. Think of it like this. If I have one hair and I take one hair and I say, hey, you one hair, stand up, it's going to fall down under its own weight. But if I take all the hairs and I say, hey, you're all a little bit sticky, why don't you stick to each other and hold each other up? They're going to hold each other up, because 1,000 hairs is stronger than one hair, right? And so if all your hairs are just a little bit sticky, but they're not hard, then they can move and kind of maintain some structure and shape. If you want to like get some volume out here or some pieciness out in the front, when you have sticky hair, it kind of does that. One thing too, if you want like a really casual, natural, messy looking style, there's no substitute for actually messing up the hair. Like, if you sit and try to perfectly make hair messy, it always looks like try hard. It never looks natural to me. But if you actually just push the hair around for a while, then it starts to look like actual messy. It looks more believable, I guess you'd say. Dang, I'm really bummed that I blow dried a middle part into this. At first I was like, yeah, we're gonna go full middle part, full 90s, but this haircut would actually part on either side just as well because it is cut symmetrically. But I'm not feeling the middle part. But it's the look, it's that 90s look. Freaking Leo DiCaprio here, almost. Maybe in the front I don't want so much volume. I try to pump up the front, and now I'm like changing my mind, and maybe I want it to be sleeker right in the front. Yeah, see, this side like held on to that volume and it's really popping up. That's the hairdryer for you. Anyways, I'm gonna fix this style off camera and then I'll give you the glamour shots of the end result.